Okay, let's get into some historical background on the theory of evolution. But first, let's answer a question. Why would it be beneficial for an organism's color to match its background? Well, the main reasons would be to avoid predators or hide from them, or ambush prey. Organisms that survive due to their coloration will leave more offspring with their traits. Things that allow them to survive and reproduce are considered adaptations, characteristics that help them based on the environment. Each adaptation is unique to its environment. Now, where do we get all of this knowledge? Well, the very best and first scientist to document evolution was Charles Darwin, because this is what we're talking about. Changes in genetic makeup in a species over time. Species adapting and evolving. Charles Darwin's theory of how this worked was natural selection, which we talked about in the previous video. The living things with beneficial traits produced more offspring than others and caused changes in the traits of the organisms over time. But how did he come about his theory? Now, you all watched a nice video on him and Wallace and how he came about with his theories. So, Darwin's position on the HMS Beagle as a naturalist and a companion to the captain. And his job as a naturalist was to observe and collect specimens of plants, animals, rocks, fossils. Wherever the expedition went, he went. There were a ton of things that helped him form his theories. There were some cool rocks he found on continental divides above the sea level, which contained seashells, which was odd. 13,000 feet above sea level with seashells. There was a river in Argentina, which gradually rose through a series of plateaus, which appeared to be ancient beaches. After a volcanic eruption in Chile, Darwin found a bunch of dead mussels, which the quake had lifted 9 feet above sea level, which were unique to that area. He also saw a petrified forest embedded in 7,000 feet of sandstone, and had been a sunken coastal woodland that had been buried in sand and then lifted up into mountains. These bits of evidence really suggested, first and foremost, that the world was pretty darn old for all of this to happen. And that helped fuel his later ideas with the help of some additional evidence. In Lima, Darwin recognized a bunch of coral. These long lines of coral that were caused by volcanoes. So life kept adding layer after layer despite all of the changes in time that passed. He also found fossils of ground sloth and armadillo that looked huge compared to the modern ones. And they were found in the same areas as the modern animals. They just were gigantic, which really hinted that these were from the same line. These were related, and that maybe things do change over time if given enough time in the proper environment. Now, when Darwin reached the Galapagos, he looked at a variety of different things: tortoise shells, iguanas, but the finches were some of his favorite. Now, which characteristic was the most different about the finches, and why was it good that the characteristic was different? It was the beak. There were so many different birds that he thought were completely different species, but it turns out they were all similar types of finches, but the beaks were different. And this was a good thing because there were so many different types of food sources that these birds could specialize in what they ate. Large, strong beaks were needed to break large seeds. Small beaks were needed to eat small seeds. There were some that were used to grab branches and spear insects to eat. So each beak had its own specialization. And this all helped Darwin's theory along. So other scientists at work proving theories along the way that helped Darwin understand how the world was changing and help us understand how the world is changing. Charles Lyell proposed that the Earth shifts, the crust moves, layers upon layers are built, and small changes over time build today's landscapes. Which are the older mountain ranges? The Rockies or the Appalachians? The Appalachians, because they are rounder and flatter than the sharp Rockies. The Rockies are a newer mountain chain. The Appalachian Mountains have been worn down over time. Of course, he wasn't the only one with their theory of evolution and how it happens. Evolution was a common key term that was being thrown around. People just weren't sure what caused it. Darwin had a colleague such as Jean-Baptiste Lamarck who had a different theory. His theory was that an organism throughout its life can build or change a trait. And then once it is built or changed to that organism's potential, it will pass on that improved or changed feature to its offspring. Which there's no evidence that it does that, but it was a popular theory at the time. So a giraffe, for instance, will stretch its neck and stretch, and its offspring will then get its stretched neck, and so on and so forth. But that leads to some pretty ridiculous situations. That being said, I pierced my ears when I was 13, or at least I had them pierced when I was 13. Under the idea of that theory, my daughter should have been born with pierced ears. How many of you have had a change occur to your body? A scar, a piercing, or break, a tear, that under this theory would show up if you had children. It doesn't quite fit the mold as well as natural selection does. Thomas Mathias discussed population in humans and his ideas on the struggle of existence or competition. Now, when a population of any species, including humans, grows exponentially, populations will become too big. Famine, disease, and war will break out in that population and keep the population in check by killing off the weakest members. It's competition at its greatest. These were all things that fueled the theory of natural selection. Certain organisms with certain traits will survive better and have children. There was also the idea of artificial selection. We were causing changes too, right, left, and up and down, with all sorts of species of animals and plants. We were changing things from the original to new, to based on what our needs are. How many breeds of dogs are there? We caused that. In the images below, this is all the different pigeons we've caused. All of the vegetables we get from the common wild mustard plant. Bananas. Here is the original banana. Here is the one we know. The same with the corn, ancestral corn, modern corn. We did that. Completely different species now. We have forced it to evolve artificially. Selective breeding. We picked it. Cows, cats, guinea pigs, ducks, apples, oranges. We changed it. And that was another sign that things do change. Species do change. Traits change over time. We as a species are actually much taller than we were 100 years ago. Height is in itself a newer trait. So the taller you are, the newer the traits you have in that sense. But he developed a concept of natural selection from all of this information. Organisms in a population have different traits. Species produce more offspring that can survive, and offspring with favorable traits will survive to reproduce. And new species come about when you end up with a population that has accumulated tons and tons and tons of those adaptations over many generations. This is not an overnight thing. And then the species changes. And it's just minute little changes. Think of it this way. What breeds really quickly in the animal kingdom? Most of you might say a rabbit. When rabbits have a hutch and they have their children tend to be different versions of the parents with some mutations here or there. No two, unless they're twins, look exactly alike. Some have longer ears, some have longer tails, some have longer or better senses of smell and hearing. In the wild, they're going to be competing for food, and they're going to be competing for safety, because often enough, rabbits make too many kids than they can take care of or that can take care of themselves. So some are going to die. Now, maybe the ones that blend in are better to finding food, or are faster, or can hear better, are going to survive. The others will not. The ones that survive are going to have kids. And slowly the population will shift to reflect those faster, better camouflaged, better hearing, better sense of smell rabbits. And we've just had microevolution. Now those changes can pile on and pile on and pile on until the one rabbit species that it started as is no longer the same as what you have now. And you can have a completely different species of rabbit. And then you can pile it on more and more, and you get a whole different species. But there's some rules natural selection follows I want you to know. This is not a direct and intentional thing. No. Not direct and intentional in the least. It did not say, you're going to be the one to survive, and you're going to be the one to survive, and you're going to be the one to survive. It is random based on what you're born with. Depends on genetic chance. And can only work with genes that are there. You can't be in an environment and say, ooh, I want to survive, and then automatically come up with the adaptation. You're born with the adaptation or you're not. And natural selection is limited by the resources in the environment. Each environment, each set of resources are going to dictate a different type of population. But natural selection does result in an increase in traits that help an organism survive. The weaker ones will perish, and the ones with the adaptations that allow it to survive are going to repopulate and fill in the population. So you're going to have a larger population of organisms that can survive in that environment. And it results in the loss of the weaker traits, the ones that aren't going to be beneficial. And that's just a quick background on Darwin's theory and how he came about it. If you have any questions, let me know. There is a case study, an Amoeba Sisters video, and a writing assignment to do next. All right. Bye, guys.